Cinzia Arruzza, co-organizer of the International Women's Strike in the United States, joins us to discuss the new wave of militant feminist activism and the increasingly coordinated movements that are developing around labor, reproductive justice, and environmental rights, this week on The Feminist Perspective.
The Feminist Perspective with Dr. Sophia Johnson is made possible by Hollingsworth Real Estate Group. Ask Hollingsworth about real estate. And by Allstate. You're in good hands.
Women don't work only on the workplace, on the formal labor market. They also do work that sustains life on this planet. They take care of children, they take care of the household. So the strike today was also a strike from this kind of work. And also, the majority of women work in precarious jobs. Initiatives like this serve the purpose of empowering women who then can also go back to the workplace and unionize, organize, and feel in solidarity.
Cinzia Arruzza became an activist at the age of 13. She spent years organizing student movements in Rome and protesting injustices around the world. In 2017, she co-organized the International Women's Strike, a global call for gender equality. Wearing red as a symbol of solidarity, women in 50 countries protested the policies of the administration of Donald Trump, encouraging women to refrain from working and spending money. Taking as its inspiration the new wave of feminist militancy that has erupted globally, Cinzia Arruzza has co-authored a manifesto that reimagines gender justice in an anti-capitalist form, one that leads beyond liberal economic policies and decisively rejecting what they describe as lean-in dogma and feminism for the 1%. Vogue magazine named Feminism for the 99% one of the most anticipated books of 2019. Cinzia Arruzza, welcome to The Feminist Perspective.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
In the book, Feminism for the 99%, you describe the competing visions of feminism and suggest this fork in the road is giving us a choice which bears extraordinary consequences for humankind. Can you describe the competing visions of feminism that would have led to the International Women's Strike?
Yeah. So in recent decades, in the last 20, 30 years, the kind of feminism that has become, most relevant, most discussed, was what we may call liberal feminism or leaning feminism. So basically, a feminism based on the idea that women should fight for their own emancipation, especially on an individual level. So, breaking the glass ceiling, this kind of discourse, being more self-confident, participating in CEOs, and so on and so on. And this has become basically the kind of feminism, what people, generally speaking, think feminism is about. Right. So this is, the feminism, for example, Hillary Clinton may be one representative of this kind of feminism. So what inspired us to write this book, the manifesto, was the fact that in the last 3 years, and this is something that is not very much discussed in the United States, in the last 3 years we had the rise of an impressive, powerful feminist movement around the world. Yeah. Like fighting for things like abortion or against gender violence, but also fighting for against the immigration policies that penalize immigrants, against wars, and against economic injustice. And this is really an incredibly powerful movement that for 3 years organized women's strikes, feminist strikes around the world on March 8th. So what we thought is that this is actually the road that feminists should take today. Right. Because in a sense, the feminism, the liberal feminism of which I was talking about, was somehow inspired by this, trickle-down logic. So if we have more women in positions of power, more business women, more women representative, in parliament or institutions, this will basically improve conditions for all the other women. This has not happened. let's be honest and frank about this. This has not happened. I mean, good for them, good for the women who managed to break the glass ceiling. But what about the other ones? The ones left in the basement cleaning the glass shards? Or so basically, this is what we said. Like what we thought. Like we are having now the development of a different kind of feminism. Yeah. which is retrieving somehow the radicalism of the feminism of 40 years ago, the second wave. So the feminism that was challenging the whole system of oppression and was not just promoting, you know, like more women in CEOs or this kind of discourse.
Right. Well, you touch on this really important point, and assuming that populism is a political logic that can lead us in an emancipatory direction, I think, I really want some clarification. I think there are people out there that want some clarification on how should feminist movement participate in the construction of this populist logic. Is your commitment, or is the commitment to the 99% going in the right direction?
Mm-hmm. So, first of all, I mean, it depends what we mean by populism.
Right.
Because,
the populism that got Trump elected.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, no, that's not the kind of populism clearly we should develop. I mean, populism today the term populism is used to define whatever kind of politics that speaks to, you know, the large majority of people.
Right.
So Bernie Sanders is a populist.
True.
Corbyn is a populist. Okay, if populism means this, then I'm a populist too. But in a sense, the term has been used somehow to stigmatize political perspectives that break precisely with this consensus, you know, about fulfilling the interest of the 1% of those in power, of the rich, and I think it has been, you know, like it has been really been used in recent years to somehow suggest that this kind of political perspectives, you know, like Sanders in the United States, are somehow dangerous or can lead us in dangerous. You know, on a dangerous road and so on. I do think that, I mean, I personally don't use the term populism to define my politics.
Right.
But again, if by populism we mean that we want, you know, like the liberation of all women, not just one, you know, a tiny minority of elite women. If we want to have economic justice and we want to, and we are fed up with the fact that, you know, only a few people are making a lot of profits, and a few companies are making a lot of profits, and most of the population, even in this country, is, you know, not even managing to arrive at the end of the month.
Right.
I mean, this is the kind of politics that we should reclaim.
Right.
Whatever we want to call it.
Right.
And from this viewpoint, I think that the feminist movement today is really going in the direction of speaking to the needs, desires, conditions of life, and experiences of the large mass of women. So working class women, women who work at, you know, at home as caregivers or, you know, care providers.
Sure.
Immigrant women, racialized women. So the women that nobody, you know, talked about. The women we can see, for example, in the movie Roma. So this is a feminism movement that really wants to talk to these women, and that is organizing these women.
Yeah,
so women, so not just elite. You know, white women and so on.
Right.
So from this viewpoint, I think that the feminist movement is already going in this direction.
Right.
And our manifesto wanted to be a contribution to this. So it wanted to be an attempt to give a general perspective in terms of analysis of the situation in which we find ourselves, and the necessity of really redeveloping what we call also class struggle feminism, so class-based feminism.
Right. And I want to explore that, tease that out a little bit. Okay. I think we talked a little bit about this on the phone. I got really excited because I spent most of my own graduate years focused on the power, if you will, of neoliberal institutions, neoliberal institutionalist policies to liberate us, an entire generation. I think that education is part of that, but it leveled the playing field. It was supposed to level the playing field in many ways. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because in the book you allude to the impact of the 40 years of liberal economic policies. What has been the impact in your interpretation?
Well, it's a disaster in the sense of what neoliberalism has meant in these 4 decades. Has been privatizations of public services and companies, and this has led, to losses of jobs and like worsening of labor conditions. It has meant an attack on labor rights and on unions around the world, not just in the United States.
Has it really worsened labor conditions?
Oh, yes.
Or has it improved the quality? Because the institutions were supposed to be more involved with creating global standards in terms of policies. So you're saying something completely different.
Yeah, I mean, but it is sufficient to, for example, Piketty's book.
Right, Capital.
It demonstrates the fact that neoliberalism, especially the last decades, have not led to a redistribution of resources and wealth. Actually, it has led to a redistribution, but to the top, not to the bottom. So in other words, people who were already making money have made even more money. Sure. And everybody else is actually doing much worse. And now we are in a situation in which people of my generation, of younger people, clearly live have worse conditions of life and of work than our parents or grandparents.
Sure.
In Italy, this is absolutely clear. I mean, like the neoliberalism has led to really the destruction of a whole generation of people who couldn't find jobs, were unemployed, didn't have public services that my parents could have, and this is a process that I think touched the conditions of life of people around the world.
Right.
Not to speak of, like the old discourse about the industrialization, the idea that we should be, flexible in the labor market, and all of this was based on the idea that, like with the free market and less state intervention, meritocracy would prevail. Deserving people would, really fare better. We would have better services and so on. Nothing of this has actually happened.
Really?
I think.
You really think so? I mean, just to play devil's advocate.
So.
I mean, I've seen both sides of the research, but just to play devil's advocate for a moment, wouldn't you say that a lot of people have benefited from global economic reforms based on liberal policies?
So, I mean,
would you really say, since the end of the Cold War to the present, people haven't really benefited?
I mean, so it depends on how you look at the situation. So clearly there is a general economic growth. So there is a general improvement of conditions.
Sure.
But in terms of class divide, and in terms of like the divide between in terms of income, for example, obviously, like the divide has actually gotten much worse.
Okay.
But not only this. I mean, if we like when we speak about global policies, like take the International Monetary Fund.
Yeah.
So the adjustment plans have led to mass privatizations of services in countries like Argentina, Greece, all of Latin America, really, and loss of jobs, attacks to the public healthcare system, and so on. So I would say that it is really hard to claim that the conditions of life in countries that have been subject to this kind of pressures have improved for the mass of people. They have improved for a minority, yes, clearly. But not for the mass of people. For the mass of people, look, it is really sufficient to look at the situation in Greece today. Yeah. It is a country that is entirely devastated by unemployment. They are privatizing whatever they can privatize. Yeah. The pension system has been reformed I don't know how many times. Yeah. Basically, this was the last resource that people were having in Greece in order to try to maintain some kind of a standard of life because of the youth is unemployed. Yeah. But now pensions are also under attack and so on. And poverty, homelessness and poverty are on the rise and so on. All of this in the name of repaying the debt.
Right.
And debt has become really a weapon of choice internationally. So it has been used really as a weapon to force governments to pass austerity measures, to cut public funds, and to also attack labor rights. I mean, if we take, for example, the European Union, again, where there was a certain standard, social democratic standard, let's say, in terms of labor rights. This is under attack everywhere.
Wow.
So it's much more difficult to get a permanent job.
Sure.
Or, So.
Well, I think you're right. I think that I see both sides of the argument as well.
Yeah.
Remember, I was steeped in this for about 20 years. So for me, I was on the other side of it, and thinking that economic liberalization, in many ways, is more important than this gendered identity politics, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. I think you have yourself, along with a number of other prominent feminist thinkers, raised questions of whether a supposedly one-sided focus on identity in social movements is at the expense of addressing broader economic inequalities. What does this debate mean for feminist movement, and that on the surface has one mobilizing factor and this broader shared identity? Yeah.
So this is something interesting about this, the new feminist movement, the fact that, if you take, for example, countries like Argentina or Italy, the movement started from a specific issue. Right. So gender, in the case of Argentina was femicides, so gender violence. And then it focused on abortion because they're still fighting to have a free and legal abortion because abortion is still illegal. At the same time, starting from one single demand, let's say, or which is connected to our condition of life as women specifically, the movement expanded its scope and gaze and demands.
Quite naturally, almost.
Yeah, it was, I think, in a sense, naturally, of course, there was a political, there were political groups intervening, and it's never just spontaneous. But yes, in a sense, it was a natural expansion of the scope. So that, for example, in the Argentinian movement, in one of the first manifestos they wrote, they were speaking about gender violence and striking against gender violence.
Right.
But they started saying, when we look at gender violence, we shouldn't look just at interpersonal violence. So, for example, domestic abuse, domestic violence, or domestic rape.
Right.
But there are various forms of violence of which women are victims. For example, the violence of immigration policies against immigrant women.
Right.
And just to give an example, we know for a fact, because humanitarian organizations have clearly said this, that women, refugee and migrant women in Libya, like hundreds of them, in detention centers, are routinely raped as a form of torture, of political and torture as a form of control.
Right.
So if we speak about gender violence, then we should speak about issues like immigration
as well.
If we speak about gender violence, we should speak about the economic violence as well. So the fact that women are paid less and that they are made to be dependent on men, so they cannot escape situations of violence or abuse. And we should talk about war, because how many women die of war?
Right.
And also, the violence that climate change entails for women. So basically, using the lens of violence or gender violence, they have basically developed the critique of a whole form of society and of all the elements that contribute to gender violence. So, which is not just an interpersonal problem; it's a structural one. Because it is true that we could say all of us suffer from war and from climate change and so on. But if we look at the data, clearly women are the most affected. Yeah,
disproportionately
affected.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I love this book, and you know this.
But it's good to play the
absolutely. So it seems to me that what we have here then is there's a practical challenge in the field, in the discourse, on the streets, between and within countries. In what ways can feminist thinkers and feminist activists contribute to the strategic and reciprocal articulation of different struggles? For example, what does the participation in a general strike or a day without actually mean for the 99%? How should people receive this message? Some people are like, listen, I have to work. No work, no pay. You know.
Yeah. So no, that's a difficult question, of course. In terms of feminist strikes, the way we articulated this was to say, like, first of all, not all women work in the formal labor market, but all women work. All women work, or at least, all women who have responsibilities for their family, they are doing a lot of work.
Yeah.
Raising children, caring for the elderly, for the sick, and so on. And then not all women can strike legally because the level of unionization is so low and so on. So we articulated different ways to participate in the strike.
Yeah.
From a wildcat strike, like calling sick, for example, which happened in some school districts as a way to participate.
Yeah.
To wearing red in the workplace, organizing meetings in the workplace at lunchtime in order to discuss these kind of issues and problems, and the movement has done something similar around the world. By the way, we did also like a letter, a strike. Letter to strike from reproductive work at home.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So basically saying, I'm
on strike right now.
You do, to male partners, you do the work today because I'm going to the demonstration.
Right.
And so on. And for example, in various countries like Spain and so on, they, in order to allow women who have reproductive responsibilities to strike, they organize some form of collective care work managed by men.
Sure.
So that, for example, like childcare, but managed by men, where men who were supportive of the strike went there, took care of the children, while the women were participating in the demonstration, in the strike.
Right.
For us, it was important to speak about strikes. Because around the world, this is really a key issue because for two reasons. One is to emphasize the fact that women work a lot, and this work is very often not recognized as work, and to reclaim the role that we play within societies. And the second reason is that we wanted to also legitimize the term strike.
Yeah.
So in other words, everywhere in the world, basically, unions have organized fewer and fewer strikes, also because they're under attack, and the conditions are not simple.
Yeah.
So we wanted to reintroduce the idea of strike in the political conversation, let's say, in the public common sense. The fact that we work, but we can withdraw our labor, and this is a weapon we have.
Now, do you have any data at this point on how impactful 2017 has been? Like, how many women did not work? How many women actually striked?
I honestly,
I'm curious as well, because
in the United States or in the
United States, I mean, this is where we are.
In the United States, I mean, I don't know the number of women. What we know is that 3 school districts shut down because teachers called sick.
Which school districts?
I don't remember the names.
East Coast, West Coast?
No, it was in I think the Midwest.
Okay.
Yeah, and then some individual workplaces. Shut down, but it was especially in like they had the new school, like we organized
of course
a women's strike and so on. But in other countries, but at the same time, like in the United States, the unions could not call for a strike.
Yeah,
because
of course,
you know, general strikes are forbidden by law in the United States. So we didn't have the you know, we had unions supporting the idea, but they couldn't really legally organize a strike. But in other countries, unions are on March 8th actually did call for general strikes. For example, in Spain, in Spain it was 6 million women this year. And last year it was 5 million strike. And in Italy, you know, like a number of you know, small radical unions called for a general strike. So this allowed women to go on strike, and we are speaking about hundreds of thousands of women on strike. And the same in Argentina and so on. So it depends on the country, it depends on the condition, and whether you have unions that are able and willing to call for a legal strike. Because this, of course, changes a lot.
Over time. Future of the movement, where are we going? I'm getting a signal, we're going to have a few minutes. What's the future, based on this manifesto, where do you see the movement going? We know where it's come from.
Yes.
But where are we going?
So, first of all, I think that one thing that we should do is to really organize transnational meetings of the movement. The movement has, you know, coordinated on a transnational level, you know, through Facebook and so on, but we never really met in person. And I think it would be important to you know, like exchange experiences, to exchange practices, ideas, manifestos, and so on. And the second issue is to really try to expand the movement. So this is the way I see the situation. You know, like we start as a feminist movement. So we start from a particular condition, which is that of women, both cis and trans, and from a specific oppression. But we want to articulate a political proposal and a struggle for everybody, not just for women, because we know that there is no way we will be free as women if the rest of the world is not free. We need to change really the system. So from this viewpoint, I think one of the challenges, you know, and for the future of feminism is to have this capacity of speaking to everybody. This is why we called it Feminist for the 99%. So to the whole of society, and connecting the various struggles and movements that are already happening around various issues, from immigration, racism, class struggle, and so on.
Cinzia Arruzza, thank you for coming to the Feminist Perspective. It's been so good to talk to you. This conversation will certainly continue.
Yes.
The Feminist Perspective with Dr. Sophia Johnson is made possible by Hollingsworth Real Estate Group. Ask Hollingsworth about real estate. And by Allstate. You're in good hands.